Hi everyone. Hi Victoria.
Hello, Carol.
I'm on then. I think we're both on. Hello everybody. Natural Products Meets here again in lovely July. So today it's about Brexit and exporting for UK companies. And I've went out and found an amazing expert, and we've been connected for some time, Victoria Boldson. So just to let you all know, I've been ringing around a lot recently to UK and international companies, and of course with the Brexit and the export challenges and transport and the timing of getting goods to market, it's a minefield out there. So we thought we'd bring Victoria, who is the expert. So it's Victoria Boldson, everybody, if you don't know her. She's a CEO and founder of Bolst Global, which specialises in the health, food and drink and supplement market. Perfect, right? So I'm so glad to have you, Victoria. And what she won't say about herself, this specialist export company that she runs, is she's an award-winning marketeer as well. So she's a very talented, and I'm so delighted to have you here today to help out our industry, Victoria.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, Carol. Thanks so much for having me. I do really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I couldn't answer the question, so I'm a bit of loss here, everybody, because seriously, from everybody that everybody's told me ringing round, Victoria, I don't know, it's just mind-numbing, the challenges they're facing and in their everyday work, right, and relationships have got. So
yeah, it's tough. It is tough out there. It's been very difficult over the past few months for sure. And we've seen that with clients in the community that we work with as well. And so, yeah, look, I mean, I'm delighted to be here, Carol, and speak to the community. And, you know, we have had a lot of questions come to us. So, you know, what we've decided to do is take a thematic approach and give some general advice on some of the key areas that we've seen the same style questions coming up again and again. It's very difficult to be too specific, just because, you know, there needs to be the context a bit more as well. And obviously every company is slightly different. You know, you're all experiencing very different challenges in different ways. So, you know, everyone is still grappling with this. I think it's clear to say, not just us as experts, you know, government level across the EU, as well as they're interpreting the rules of the new TCA, the Trade Cooperation Agreement. You know, it's difficult at the moment, but I think, you know, what we want to try and do today is focus on some of those key areas. I'd like to talk about we're going to do a short quick export 101. I kind of want to take you through some of what's changed. You know, what are the fundamental changes now? We can't change the past, but here we are. What's happening now? What's changed? And then, you know, some of the key fundamentals now that need to be in place for businesses exporting. I mean, we are focusing today on GB and UK out into the EU as opposed to the other way around. I know that there's obviously the side of importation that is important, and a lot of those checks and changes coming in later on in the year as well, which potentially could be another topic for a later stage. It's too much to deal with today, so we're going to look at GB out into the EU predominantly, and you know, the impact is certainly coming the other way. As I say, the one thing I would advise people to sort of be aware of, if you are importing anything at the moment from the EU, that you've since the 1st of January, whether that's ingredients, whether that's finished goods, etc. Whilst there's not the checks and some of the documentation in place, don't forget that you will still need to submit your supplementary declarations within 175 days after you have imported those goods. So I will share a link on that as well if people aren't aware of that, because a lot of people I think might get caught out as a requirement from an importation side. But for the rest of the session, let's focus on the whole GB out. So
what we're going to do is run out the top most popular things that you've experienced since Brexit. We can't put Brexit into the room 101 though, can we? And then we're going to do some questions, and we've had hundreds of questions, like you say, but what we've done, everybody, is group them into the most popular questions, because we can't be very specific to every question, but we are going to signpost, and Victoria's got some great news at the end of this, and there's actually some potential financial support out there. So hang with us, because I know it's a very complex subject, but this is the woman who's going to just simplify some things to get you going. It won't answer everything. It's impossible, but we're going to get you started and make you all feel like you're all suffering, but we can start with the help right now, Victoria.
Yeah, definitely. And I really hope that everybody can take something away from today, some practical advice, some support, or like you say, just knowing that, you know, everybody is having challenges, but there are global opportunities for us as businesses. And I think, you know, it's hanging in there, getting through this together as well, collaborating wherever possible across the community, supporting each other. And we move on from this, and we see what the future holds. So shall I start with a quick kind of state of play and kind of what's changed effectively? So we have now obviously officially left the EU, which means that in the eyes of the European Union, we are what's termed a third country. So that means that we are treated as such, if you like, a third country beyond the EU. So we are subject to border controls, checks, new levels of documentation that we've never had to historically do once we joined the European Union many years ago. So whenever products are exiting from the UK and entering into the EU, we have export declarations and import declarations. We don't have the privilege of being in the single market within the European Union anymore. And we're subject to then potentially tariffs and duties and extra costs coming in. Now, the challenge has been that with the trade cooperation agreement with the EU, the way that that's been interpreted, and it was one of the questions actually asked around why is it different between, you know, the way that Spain will customs authorities are asking us questions, and the way that they're going to potentially cause some issues for us at border control versus the Netherlands versus Germany. And that's because within that agreement, the member states of the European Union are interpreting the rules differently at national level. So that's caused quite a lot of issues. And we've certainly seen that as well. Spain particularly has been quite difficult, I have to say. We work with a client and we supply quite a lot of goods into the Spanish market, and it's been difficult, particularly initially. It's got better now, but the level of paperwork and detail that they were requesting was quite draconian. So that has been difficult. Obviously then, as a third country, that also means that tariffs and duties may now be applicable for your products when you're selling them into the EU. And this is where the concept of rules of origin come into play, which is difficult to kind of manage sometimes because it's a new, for a lot of people, new concept. If obviously with the trade cooperation agreement, a lot of people saying, great, we've got a deal with the EU now. But I think when it comes to that side of the tariffs and the duties, that's only the case, obviously, if we can claim preferential status with the products. So if they do, in the eyes of the EU, originate from the UK or the EU. If not, that can have an impact, obviously, if it's a non-preferential product and duties are applicable. For example, you're bringing products in finished from other third countries around the world and then sending it into the EU as wholly finished goods, or you are equally processing some ingredients and then supplying out, but there's not enough what they would term transformation that's happening to allow you to say that it is a UK, the preferential status does apply to you as well. So that's tricky because it will impact then your value chain, your margins, and some of your cost base as well. The other thing to think about within this is obviously because the UK has obviously left, so that means that we've been very busy signing a lot of free trade agreements, because a lot of the trade agreements that we have around the world are subject to the fact that we were part of the EU. So it was the EU signing agreements that were in place around the world. Because we're not part of that anymore, we've had to go out and sign new agreements. Now, that's been, you know, some of them have been hailed as really, you know, really advantageous for the UK. For example, Japan earlier on in the year was one that, particularly for the food and drink sector, with some of the quotas and import tariffs, etc., and zero tariffs that they're looking at reducing, would be a great advantage. Obviously, Australia this week as well has been in the news quite a bit. I mean, the challenge with that is obviously great, but we need to look at the finer detail of what these trade agreements actually mean for us. So, but without having a trade agreement in place, what does happen is that we then usually would revert to tariffs become applicable, basically, because if we don't have a free trade agreement in place, we are then subject to what they call the WTO tariffs around the world. And it may then be that actually when you're trading globally now, so if the impact this is having not just on the EU, but on your global trade is prevalent there as well, potentially. So it's worth considering that the changes that's happening, yes, for the EU, but has a wider global context potentially. So if you are trading with other global markets beyond the EU, is there a free trade agreement in place? What tariffs and duties may now be applicable also when you're trading there? So it's worth considering. And also, I guess, from an importation point of view of your supply chain as well, because if there isn't a free trade agreement in place, it works the other way around as well. And so then that might also then have an impact on your supply chain. So I think it's clear what I'm trying to say here is we've left, so we're trading in the EU, we've got new rules and regulations that we have to adhere to because, you know, we are no longer part of that European Union, but then the impact also then goes further on potentially a global basis for the other markets that you may be either looking to sell into, already doing so, or potentially bringing product importation side as well. So there's impacts on a number of levels, if you see what I mean.
But that would be good and bad though, Victoria, right? So, you know, some countries where you've probably been paying duty, you don't have to anymore, so you might get an uplift.
Yeah, it can work both ways. It can certainly work both ways.
Not all doom and gloom then.
No, we'll see. We will see what the future holds on a number of levels there. So I wanted to go into a quick kind of, if you like, 101 of, in terms of then, we come back to sort of trading with the EU now. What are the fundamentals before we start answering some of the questions? What has changed? What do we need to do? And what's become more important now for us to consider as exporters? So obviously, anybody that has been continuing to trade knows that the importance now of the EORI numbers, which you need to apply for. So if you're trading and supplying goods out, you need a GB EORI number, you need an XI one for Northern Ireland. And then if you are also importing and taking care of being the importer of record and declarations within the EU, you need an EU EORI number. But that's also only if you have an EU entity established yourself as well, in order to make those import declarations. So most people will probably just have a GB or an XI if you are supplying into Northern Ireland, but it is a requirement, and it's a requirement to also put on your commercial invoice. Without the EORI number, you can't have an export declaration. So that's first and foremost for everyone. I think we all know that. The other thing that has an impact as well, going into this, talking about exporting and importing, is Incoterms, which are a generic 11 terms set of, if you like, rules which really determine and state the risk, the cost and the responsibility between the buyer and the seller. And this is something, at what point does those risks, roles and responsibilities change from one to the other? And I think when we've traded with the EU previously, because we've not really had to consider that as much, it's not had as much importance because we've not had the customs declarations and the checks in place. It's been easier, if you like, to kind of agree something, but it's not always been as enforceable or has as much, has had as much impact as it does now. And we're certainly seeing that in the way that the choice of the Incoterms that you're supplying on and the difficulties that some of that can bring. So you can start on a Ex Works basis, which I know some of the GB traders and exporters are using, which basically means that you are neither responsible for the export declaration nor for the import declaration. So on both sides there's no responsibility as a seller. Having said that though, and I think what a lot of people miss is the fact that you still need, even though you're not doing the declaration, say on the export side, you still need to be able to prove that those goods have been exported from a HMRC perspective. Because if you get an audit, they want to show that, you know, you've zero rated the goods and they've gone out of the country, proof that they've gone, basically. So it's worth noting that even if you're selling on Ex Works, you should still make sure you get a proof of export from your buyer, and that can be something that you could add into your terms and conditions, for example, with those contracts on a business to business basis, and make sure that they provide you with If it's going sea freight, the copy of the bill of lading. If it's going road freight, the CMR, air freight, the airway bill. Retain those records, and the record keeping side is also obviously very important within this. X works up to DDP, which is the other Incoterm, where you then do both exporting and importing declarations. So you have full responsibility, and then there's within that spectrum all sorts of other areas basically. But this impacts not just from a seller's perspective. You've also got to think about the customer journey. So whether you're selling business to business, and particularly business to consumer, if you're enforcing, if you like, the buyer to basically pay any duties or any VAT when you're selling business to consumer to an individual in the EU, that could be quite, maybe not a great experience for them, and maybe not help with the repeat purchase. It's also might impact your buyer relationships. If you're saying, look, you need to do all of the export and import declarations, that might then impact your attractiveness, if you like, as a supplier to some of the EU businesses that you're working with as well. So there's all that in the mix to think about. The last thing, I guess, I think before we move on to questions, because I'm conscious of time and we could keep talking on this for a while.
Like a perfect storm here, Victoria. What with COVID and now Brexit, who knew, right? But
I know, honestly, it couldn't come at a worse time, really, could it, in that respect? The other thing just to mention is commercial invoice now. Again, obviously, we're used to putting commercial invoices together, but from an international basis and with the EU now, it's never been that important. That's your critical document now on the basis of which your customs declarations are made. So putting as much information in there, obviously you need your EORI number to be stated on there with the statement that's there, that's the standard. The commodity code is another area that I think a lot of people have had to get their heads around the fact of how you classify your goods, and that is important. Get that right, because that then determines what tariffs and duties may be applicable. So all the things we've said around how competitive you may be, how duties and tariffs are applicable on not just an EU basis but a global basis, preferential rates, etc., come down to your tariff codes that you're using, your commodity codes, sorry, that you're using. So making sure you get those right and putting them on your invoice is clear, because that is what is telling customs this is what the product is, that's globally recognised. And then obviously preferential origin statements if rules of origin do apply. I mean, we did have a question on rules of origin as well, asking about that. How do you get, preferential status? And essentially, if it's an EU or a UK originating product, then it's easy to kind of classify as such. The challenge comes when it's obviously you've got a multitude of suppliers outside and the level of processing that's actually being done. And that's where it becomes tricky. And there's some product specific rules within the TCA on rules of origin that you could have a look at within that. The other thing just quickly to mention is that actually it's also worth looking within your tariff code, your commodity code, what level of duty and taxes would actually be applicable anyway, because in some cases it may be very, very small, in which case if you're just talking 2-3%, actually it may not impact your value chain that much anyway. And in that sense, actually, even if you are non-preferential, it's not going to be that big a deal. Where it kicks in is obviously when it does start to creep up into higher percentages. And that's where then you do need to see what other solutions could there be and the impact that that's going to have on your business as you're trading. So okay. Yeah, I think we should probably dive into some of these questions.
By the way, I'm sure you are, as all expert specialists out there. But I think just to sum up from what I've, I'm just here and listening to everybody, and it seems to me like all the hoops people are doing for outside of the EU. And they're still going through some quite lengthy export paperwork and guidelines and processes. Sorry, this is a very basic analogy, but it seems to me now that's all happening in the EU. So where before it was just easier to send, now for each country we've got different, just like if you're going outside of the EU. So basically you've got another 20 odd countries to get individual processes, so you've got to pick your favorite ones. But let's go to some questions, because we had literally hundreds of questions. We couldn't take them live today, sorry everybody, but we knew it'd be like we would probably get a bit swamped with it, so we're going to try and get the most questions answered. So we've got a question here from Prodigy Snacks, And they said, a Holland-based distributor, Victoria, insists we set up an EU company to trade with so they are not liable for their product.
Yeah.
Now, is this what I suppose what we're saying is, what are the solutions besides setting up an EU company, or should they do that?
Yeah, I think, look, that is very much, I think from that question then, so if the Netherlands distributor is asking for the setup, there's possibly a couple of things here. The liability that they're referring to is because as a British seller, if you like, and they are asking the Netherlands distributor to officially become the importer of record, potentially. I mean, it will depend also on the Incoterms on which you're selling, obviously, as well, and who is the importer of record. I think there's a question around who's that, because when you are importing, you're taking responsibility for the products, and equally, this also ties in, interestingly enough, with the address issue, which is something that a lot of companies have been having issues with in terms of having a EU address on the packaging of their products, which is a legal requirement. And the reason behind that is obviously because the way that the EU see it is there needs to be a point of contact within the European Union, of which obviously a UK address will not suffice anymore, whereby if there is any safety issues, consumer issues, there's a contactable place in which you know you can contact and raise any issues. Now, if you are putting on your labeling an importer, one of your distributors or a number of your distributors on there, you are basically, by doing so, they actually sort of de facto do become that responsible person, if you like, within the EU, the responsible entity. So by doing that, that's probably why the Dutch distributor doesn't want to have that responsibility and that liability. And that's why they're saying, we need you to therefore have an EU address, or you know, another mechanism by which we are not liable. In that sense, we don't want the responsibility of any safety issues, etc. So what's the solution? Well, I mean, again, this comes down to, and we did have a number of questions around, do we set up in the EU? Is it viable? How can we do it? Why should we do it? I think you have to think about if it's the right business decision. So I think it's understanding, first of all, the level of EU trade that you have at the moment, and whether it's vital that you either maintain that or continue to grow it. So there's a strategic decision, I think, on which to base the decision to set up an EU entity, because doing so does obviously have more cost, more admin, more complexity. You know, if you are setting up, there's different ways to do it. If you are going to set up in an EU country somewhere, obviously you have to register the address, the fiscal representation that you're going to need, permanent as well. This has to be a physical address. It's not a case of, you know, just putting a plaque on a wall somewhere. You do need to have a physical presence somewhere that, you know, the authorities technically could come and inspect, and there's a place of contact physically. So there's a lot of cost involved with that. And again, each member state, you know, setting up a business has different rules and regulations. And so choosing which country, if you decide to do it, is also another thing to consider within this, because, you know, some of it's quite bureaucratic, quite costly. Spain's a case in point. A lot of people have also opted for the Netherlands, particularly because it's been a little bit easier to trade with. I know somebody who set up in Germany, but then have said it's been very, very difficult as well. So you then also need to think if it's the right thing to do, because you want to have that EU entity that you own, that you put on the label. It's thinking about, is that the right strategic decision as well? Is it worth the cost implication of that?
Ideally, a relationship with the distributor, an intimate relationship with the distributor, could really help you out here in your terms of your distributorship partnership. Second, you could set up, but it's tricky and difficult and expensive. Tell me there's a third win on this one, where we can get a PO Or
There is actually. Again, is it the right?
Mind on those two. So I'll go for the easy option, please. Tell me.
The other option, and there are providers, and there's people that we know that what they've actually effectively done is they've set up as businesses their own physical and legal entities within EU member states, and then offering to clients the ability to effectively utilise their address. So generally that's on a month by month or an annual sort of fee basis, if you like, that you pay to effectively use the address. And then there's obviously then they also as a service provider will take the responsibility of your products in circulation within the EU as well. So
what are they called, Victoria? If we Googled them or put some links on, what do they call themselves?
There's lots of different ones that are doing different things in different markets. I'll send them through to you, Carol, as well. I'll send you some details, and depending on whether it's food, non-food, there's different solutions. But yeah, that can be a way of working for people. Again, it's another cost though, and it depends how much trade you're doing in the EU. Is it viable? Is that an option? So there's pros and cons of everything, but there are people providing different solutions out there. So but I think
all of this is adding cost onto the product, right? So be careful of quoting at the minute, because certainly in the future, how far ahead you're going to do orders, well, the prices are going to change, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, and the other thing is the whole kind of business to consumer side of things, which is, I know a lot of traders have had issues, a lot of exporters with that business to consumer channel, that before, you'd get orders coming through the website and you'd quite easily service sending a few parcels off to Germany, to France, wherever. And obviously post 1st of January, that's become much more difficult, with a lot of couriers initially not wanting to take goods, particularly food items as well. And it's calmed down a little bit, but with what's coming with the new EU VAT reform from July, that's another area that's going to have a big impact, and potentially both, like you say, there isn't a potential advantage there actually, because whilst it's been very difficult for businesses in the first part of the year, looking at the implications and the possibilities of it's an optional sign up, but being part of the IOS, which is the import one-stop shop, for example, or the union one, depending whether you actually do have an EU entity or not, could be beneficial, particularly for the business to consumer, whereby the goods, the intrinsic value of the goods are under €150. It's a mechanism which will, in theory, facilitate the way in which you can send parcels, because a lot of it comes down to the duties of VAT. VAT has been one that's been very tricky for people to sort of navigate now that we're out of the EU side of things. And whereas normally VAT obviously is a consumer tax at point of destination, so at the country of destination the VAT becomes liable. What's happening with the new EU VAT reform is that can move then effectively for those goods under €150, they can move to the point of sale, so you actually include that within that transaction at the beginning of the point of sale, not on importation. So the customer in those markets in the EU, and not suddenly, it arrives at, in the destination, and suddenly they're getting a call saying, right, we need you to pay this amount of VAT, there's some duty, there's this on it. And that obviously, again, from a customer sort of journey and experience, isn't usually a good one. And this is a way to be able to sort of avoid that. And in theory, I mean, again, time will tell, but in theory this should be a smoother way of trying to support that channel and that availability of getting goods into the EU. But that's area.
Victoria, to be fair, that's what we're seeing, is that things will, it's been a bit of a storm, of that perfect storm like we mentioned, but things are calming down a little bit, and they are being a little bit less aggressive. But equally, transport, I mean, let's not go into there. The amount of people I've spoken to there, the goods are taking weeks, and they're stuck at borders, and the translation of the different agreements. But look, at the end of the day, let's just say this, we're going to carry on to the next question, but just reading today, since lockdown, food and drink sales in the UK up by 55%. So I'm just trying to keep positive here. I know it's a bit overwhelming, everybody, but just need to bring in those points. So Let's go to the next question from Puri. Is there a difference in regulation and level of documentation depending on B2C and B2B sale, which we've just...
Yeah, so that's kind of, sort of touched on there a bit. You know, obviously business to business is now a case where you basically, whereas before you would use a reverse, on the VAT side of things, mechanism, reverse charge mechanism. So you would obviously put the number of the VAT number of your distributor in Germany. You've got their VAT number. You put that in your reverse mechanism, charge it. Now you just obviously zero rate any business to business. So you know that just goes in that way. Obviously, then depending on obviously business to business, you still need your commercial invoice and your packing list are the two critical documents that you must provide with all of your shipments. And like I mentioned before, putting as much detail on that commercial invoice to help with the customs process and make it easier is definitely the best way forward. And then equally, obviously, if there's any other documentation that you're going to need, and that's where the products of animal origin come in, the health certificates, the phytosanitary certificates, or anything else that in those markets they ask for. And sometimes that can be a bit ad hoc at border control. We've seen that particularly early stages, asking for more detail on certain ingredients, certain levels of preservatives in some of the food items, etc., because they're also now looking at that at an EU level and making sure the compliance is there. You know, we have to adhere to their rules and regulations. So, you know, the same way that's going to happen coming back in over time as well. Obviously, we've postponed our checks importing coming in because of the complexity and having to try and get ready for it. And you know, I know, again, speaking to transport companies and people that are in the know on the supply chain, we are not nowhere near, and hence the reason we've been pushing back some of those introductions. But yeah, business to business is still very much on that basis. Where I said the business to consumer is where there's a big change at the moment happening with that new EU VAT reform coming in from July. So I think it's worth anybody that's either turned that channel off, still servicing that channel, having a look at how those VAT rules may work for you in the future as well, and how you could take advantage of some of the initiatives around that legislation. And I'll put some links into post show for you for that as well, Carol, so people can have a read around a couple of resources on that, but do bear that in mind. Yeah,
I'll spend this afternoon reading that link anyway. Moving on, Seed and Bean have asked, as an exporter to many European countries, can you please advise labelling required on product regarding importer of record? Do we need the name of the importer for each country?
Yeah, so I mean, on the label, so we take labeling, like I say, you can choose how many you want to actually put on there. I've seen it on your label in terms of your importers or the people that your distributors. I've seen it where some brands have put multiple addresses on there because they've got multiple distributors, and they're quite happy to both the distributors are happy to, like we mentioned before, take the legal responsibility of those goods in circulation in that country. And it's an easy mechanism of then, rather than having to obviously sticker anything, because that's the other issue. If you just got a UK label, there's no EU address on it, even if you've got translation of your ingredients, you should have an EU address. Or if you haven't got, say, the translation on there, you're then into stickers. Stickers suddenly extra cost, and technically they should be done before they exit the UK. And if you haven't got the right information on your label, that's where you're going to get potential issues at customs, at border control, checking it, saying it's not right, it's not got the right information, it's not in the right language. So you can put as many, you can technically put as many sort of importers in on your label as you want to. I think the question then becomes around space and around what that also can do, obviously, is it shows who you're working with, or who you are, who your customers are potentially overseas. And again, that's not a problem, that you're quite happy for, to some extent, people to know that. Obviously, some people don't always like to know. I don't want you to know who my distributor is or who I'm working with in those markets. They don't necessarily want to disclose that. The other thing as well is, and we have this with a client, that, we have multiple customers in one market. So how do you put, you know, everybody's address on there, and some of they directly compete in some ways as well. So we don't necessarily want to have all of that information on a label. So I think there's the what's possible in terms of the space that you're working with, what strategically makes sense as well in terms of that address on there. And, you know, thinking through it in that side and what's right for you. But there does need to be an EU address, and again, back to whether that whole you setting up is an option or something you want to do, or you look at an FBO service support, for example.
Sounds to me, or forgive me, you know, and like I say, it sounds to me like the relationship between, you know, your distributors is becoming, if it's not already that important, which it is, I know, but this will take it to another level, won't it? Because to try and work with them, you want them to become their experts, to also work together with you in partnership to get the nuances of each country, and not, you know, and also, you know, to be able to put a European address on the sticker. So I suppose, what are we saying here? That if distributors are not working that way collaboratively, is it worth looking for a new distributor? Am I being outrageous?
Possibly. I think it's also about, like you say, and what we've also seen though is, and I've seen this working with clients, is that across the EU, the other distributors or your customers in the EU that you're working with on a business to business basis, they don't know what the rules are either. You know, it's new for them. You know, let's not forget that this is not just impacting us. They've never had to deal with this. So in terms of knowing what the paperwork is, how they deal with this as well, we've seen having to give a lot of support to the customers. And I think that's where your customer relationship really does come into sort of fore here, around how much you as a business, as a supplier, want to invest in your EU operations, in your EU relationships that you already have. I think it's tricky at the moment to get new business in the EU because there's a nervousness around people working with GB businesses and suppliers because of the complexity and the uncertainty of still not ironing out everything that needs to happen. So I think if the EU is a key part of your business and you want to continue trading, it's about solidifying those relationships and working as closely as you can with your overseas partners, because, you know, they do, and I've seen this as well, they can choose to go and potentially get your product, a similar product, a competitor product from another EU member state where they've suddenly not got this same level of complexity anymore. You know, it's back to the way it was when they used to work with us last year. So you've got to think about, you know, how you can give that support if you still want to keep continuing to build and maintain that business. So I think, like, you're right, those relationships have never been more important than ever. And if you don't want to lose that customer, it's about trying to work with them, work as hard as you can with them to make that happen, really.
Look, we're going to stay positive because I know it's a minefield out there, but we're still got to be realistic about this. And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't help. Headlines in the BBC News is, you know, exports down 45%, 47% to Europe, but they don't cite all of it based on the Brexit. Obviously, it's COVID and overstocking and the lag of everything. Yeah. So we're going to come some positives as well, some opportunities. So let me just get to the next question. Is from the lovely health caps in Europe, who say issues with exporting LCL shipments from the UK into Europe, issues with exporting product of animal origin.
Yeah, tricky. And I think
it's a lot, to be honest, even down to oil. So I don't know what animals in olive oil, but
it's hard, it's tricky. And the thing is as well, obviously groupage, which, you know, referring to there with the LCL, is, you know, obviously within groupage, when you're not taking full truckloads, full container loads, and you do have products of animal origin that are subject to the SPS, which is the sanitary phytosanitary measures in place, so health certificates and or private attestation, phytosanitary certificate, anything like that, because of the nature of your products, then the challenge is when you are not doing full loads, and you've say maybe got, and I've seen this happen a lot, you've got multiple suppliers with multiple vet certificates and paperwork in a groupage scenario. When it was, say, for example, in a truck, all it takes is one piece of paperwork from one supplier to be not right or not accepted, and it holds the entire truck up, basically. And that's where there is a nervousness of businesses, logistics businesses, not wanting to necessarily take the groupage side of things and not take the smaller consignments because of that complexity and issues that they can have. And, you know, if it is something that has a very sort of fresh product, short shelf life, etc., or difficult to manage on the food side particularly, that's critical. That can be critically an issue. And so what we've seen is there is something called the Jeff system, which has been set up to try and support with groupage. That could be something worth considering. The other side, obviously, like you say, products of animal origin, it's tough, and it's understanding with the export health. And we know we've had quite a few questions around this, around how do we decide on this versus a composite? And I completely appreciate that a lot of the DEFRA stuff is quite complex, the decision trees, etc. So I think it's always worth speaking to other people in the community, and this is where I'm talking about the collaboration and some of your members talking together, around some of the similar products that you're working with, any issues and how people are getting through this. I can't give any magic bullets as to how to get hold of the agencies that you need to, and obviously the complexity with the export health certificates is, whilst that is a document that it's a standard practice when you trade outside of the EU, now having to deal with it within the EU, it's, again, the authorities and agencies aren't sure what's needed. There's so many different certificates. It's not a standard form. You've got to go and find what you think is the right certificate for your classification of product. And that's where...
But what you would say from this, Victoria, is you're definitely going to need a health certificate. You've got to take that, plaster off, and it's going to, whatever you've got animal-based origins, you're going to have a vet certificate. Yeah. Which one we're going to have to go and find and try and signpost people. But equally, you're going to have one. Don't send it without one, or else if it's groupage, it's going to delay everybody else's stuff. If it's individual honeys, then you're going to have to get the health certificates time and time again, or does it cover just the whole ship, like multiple shipments?
It's your shipment. It has to accompany the goods on the mode of transport. So it is a document that is official document that accompanies the goods for that specific consignment. So if you are sending, every time you send out, and if you are needing to have a health certificate or a private attestation, anything, every time you have to do it, basically, because on the health certificate side, because it's part of the official paperwork from a customs point of view.
Sorry, can I just forgive me for interrupting, but this is, so if I'm doing honey and I'm sending, lots of orders a week, I can't use one certificate for 1 week, which has covered the honey. I have to get literally health, and that's expensive, right? So that's another cost issue. I've priced my honeys, and now I've got to add on that as well.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the actual, technically the certificate is free, but where the costs come in is obviously the veterinary kind of fees, the processing fees, all that kind of stuff. Yes, and it is expensive. And the other issue that obviously is the availability of official veterinarians, the OVs that can come and actually sign that paperwork. They have to be registered and able to do so. And there's obviously now, because that level of documentation has been enforced, there's a real shortage in some ways, and a few delays around that. And obviously, it's having an impact. And that's where, if you've had them before because you've been working globally, for example, you've probably at a better advantage because you've needed to have them previously and you've got a relationship. And obviously now trying to build some of these relationships with customs agents, and this is the other thing, like on the organic side of things, a lot of people struggling to be able to get somebody on the import side in the EU because they've not had to do it obviously before. And the lack of availability of these custom agents and brokers is just phenomenal at the moment, and that's causing a real headache with people. And the people that have done well have been the ones that kind of in advance of Brexit have managed to strike up some relationships and done various things with that. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, so basically everybody, you're going to need health certificates. They're not cheap, and availability of vets are challenging, but if you've done it before to non-EU countries, you know the drill. If you haven't, then it is a system that's been in process for a long time. So once again, we're going to signpost everybody. So let's go to the last question.
Yeah.
Last but not least, everybody, but it is a big one. And with the G7 you know, recently, last week going on. Even this was brought up about Northern Ireland, and all I've heard is, you know, real challenges in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And I wish Mr. Macron would realise that, you know, it is a part of the UK which he does know about. So I won't get political, everybody. You know, I am half Irish, everybody. But let's talk business, Victoria.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing with this is obviously, if we take the Northern Ireland situation, the reason it is so complex, obviously, aside from the political side of things, is the fact that technically Northern Ireland, so the way that they've seen it and the way that they've struck up the Northern Ireland Protocol is the fact that technically Northern Ireland is still part of the EU single market, but it has left the customs union. So that's where the issue's coming, is as goods are coming in, they are being subjected to obviously EU checks in the same way that it is when it goes into the other member states. And the problem's obviously been is that for the people that are just supplying Northern Ireland, so if you are supplying some stores there, or you've got a distributor and it's only going into Northern Ireland, technically the products, the challenge has been obviously that you have to be able to prove that the goods are remaining within Northern Ireland in order to obviously not be subject to any duties, any taxes, any issues with border controls, because otherwise all the other things to do with the EU kick in, and that's been the challenge, is sometimes having to prove that's been the case. How do you prove that? Obviously as well, just the whole congestion at port and the chaos with the new checks in place at the border controls that aren't necessarily fully kind of fully ready for that. You know, that's why there's been the relaxation of, say, the supermarket goods in particular, with grace periods, obviously with the whole G7. So we're going to have to see, because technically at the end of this month, chilled meats, products of animal origin, should then the grace period that should then be finished, and there should now be other checks, and again export health certificates and things all starting to kick in, that the British government are obviously not kind of wanting to bring in so quickly at the moment, and that's the challenge. How do you show that it's not going into Ireland, obviously not wanting to create the hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland? So it's, I've been speaking to a customs, some custom agents over there, and it is very tricky. But again, there's people who have set things up there to be able to facilitate that with warehousing support, customs declarations that they can make on your behalf as well. Like, there are companies out there. I just appreciate just finding the ones that can help, and also that have the capacity to do so, because of the sort of overload of people needing support at the moment. So.
Yeah, and what do you think? I mean, look, you can't have a crystal ball on what Boris is thinking and his negotiation with the EU, but do you think there might be a pushback on the date?
I think they'll try and do it. I think it's just, again, it's the whole thing with the medicines and things like that. The relief systems, things are in place. It's about making sure that the people in Northern Ireland can still have access to some of these goods. It's such a heavy reliance of trade between us that there has to be some give, I think, because clearly there are major issues. So let's hope.
And if anybody out there has found a good solution and things are flowing and you've got a lovely solution, we'd love to hear from you as well, so we can share it with everybody. So if any of you out there have from all these major topics have got solutions, and you're free flowing, you've navigated through this challenge, then please email me, and we'll certainly share it around with everybody, if you don't mind. That would be really helpful in our community to share. So look, there's the 5 top questions. We said we weren't going to go out on a it's not negative. Look, there's opportunities here, and Victoria's a global specialist. So let Victoria tell us about once we get through the EU, and once people start to develop, and everything calms down a little bit from the EU side of things as well, because they have been maybe a little bit more officious in the situation. But give us some idea of where we can look at our export strategy then to make other advantageous tradings.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. I think, Carol, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, people that do work already outside of the EU, or maybe don't, but are now having to deal with these complexities. Taking the positive, there are then by being having to grapple with this. And I think the main challenge is the fact that because you don't quite know, and people over in the member states don't quite know how to deal with this yet, that's where it's been even more difficult. But if you look at other global markets, things around health certificates, documents, getting products into market, that's still, it's quite a standard process when trading globally. So by being able to do that and having to navigate this now with the EU, and we've seen that, you know, with somebody we've spoken to who was, you know, fought tooth and nail to keep and maintain their Irish business, and now that they kind of have and they know what they're doing, it's like, right, you know, actually we want to build on this now, and we see the opportunity globally, and they're wanting to now look at parts of the Middle East where they believe their product could have some opportunity, and they wouldn't have looked at that before because, you know, they saw it as too complex and too difficult. And I think that's the thing. It's about looking at your strategy, or if you're not thinking about where do you want to go, what's right for the business, and then, like you say, looking potentially beyond the EU and thinking where could there be other opportunities. Now, at the moment, I mean, China, you know, there's very big markets. You've got the US, you've got China, very complex. But again, could that be an opportunity to build on your learnings with the EU and just continue to then looking further afield? China is by and large back to normal. I mean, we've got a client who, you know, literally trade fairs are now going on with the partner that we have out there, and, you know, things have picked up, you know, and it's so that's they're going to see positive GDP, I think. So I think that's an area that to think about. And I think
what I'm reading on China, though, for our industry, and you'll probably agree with this, Victoria, is if China drops the necessity to offer their formulations, right? This is the biggest challenge, is you have to give all your formulations over to a company in China. And I've read recently they might be dropping that. So that would then really, you know, be a game changer, I think, because who wants to hand over their formulations? And we know what happens, you know, forgive us all. But
IP and trademarking. And that's where the cross-border e-commerce side of things isn't as heavily regulated in China. So that could be an option as a platform to enter the market, for example. There, you've obviously, we'll have to see with Australia what's going to happen with this new trade deal. There's also, I mean, we have a specialism actually, before getting dragged into a lot more of the Brexit stuff, in the Middle East. And I have to say, particularly on supplements, there is a lot of opportunity. The consumption is high, the appetite's high. It's a good market to do business.
We've seen big buyers from the Middle East at natural products you know, they're buying pallets and pallets off our people. So we've seen that for some time. That's been building, and you know, the health challenges there. So that's brilliant. So listen, can we just go to this? We're going to load up all the signposting, and obviously, you know, you've got a lot of information on your own website, bolstglobal.com. What I'd like to do is announce about this funding that people can get. So don't worry, everybody, we haven't just talked around everything. We have got some good news where you can actually get some funding. So Victoria, I'll let you tell the good news.
Yeah, well, I think this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of, actually, but there has been since February, they announced it officially, February, March time. There is a £20 million government with HMRC and PwC who have clubbed together with a £20 million fund for SMEs to help them navigate Brexit. So it is a fund which allows SMEs to, if they're eligible, the criteria is not too bad actually compared to some other funding or support streams, but you basically can access a £2,000 grant to help you with Brexit related issues or EU support that you're looking for. So obviously, therefore, that's for UK businesses that are trading. It can either be a professional training, if you're looking at some training in-house because you want to upskill some of your people to support with that, that's offered through the likes of the Chamber of Commerce's, the Institute of Export, other private providers. Or you can go down a professional advice route and use that grant for specific advice that you may have or require in order to navigate some of your own idiosyncrasies and complexities that you're facing. So it's available, and the only thing is the deadline that at the moment they're saying it will close either when the funds have expired in terms of everyone's used them, or by the end of this month. So I would urge people to take a look at that funding, see if it could work for them, and if so, get in there quick to apply and find people that can obviously help you with what you're looking for, because as part of the process you do have to put in usually like an invoice or proposal for your selected person of help or your organisation or the training fund, etc., that you're looking at. So you can sort of see what you want to do fairly quickly, put in the application, but we've seen them, they come back fairly quickly, and you know, we're helping a few clients with that at the moment with different areas, so do check that out.
So that's £2,000 per company potentially, so come on guys, let's empty that to 20 million and hopefully they'll top it up as well. That's what we want to do, right? So we'll send another It'll all be on the naturalproducts.co.uk website. If you go to the tab Natural Products Meets, we'll have a recording of this and we'll have all the signposting. I'm sorry we couldn't get more detailed. We had so many questions. We had to keep it top level for now to try and help as many people as possible, but we will be following up. And if you've got good stories that you've already navigated, please tell us, and we might feature you in another session where we have a panel and you can help other people out in our industry. But Victoria, today, thank you so much for your help. I mean, it's a minefield. You've blown my mind. So I'm only hoping, you know, you can help out people. And Bolst Global, don't forget, everybody, if you need to speak to Victoria, amazing expert, and there's lots of other experts as well available. So it's expert advice all around, I think, on this, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Find the right people that can help you with what you're looking for as a business and the support that you need, for sure. But there are people out there that can help. And like I say, talk amongst yourselves. That community feel is really important, and trying to help each other out here, I think, is the key thing to get through this. And hopefully, you know, in the future, the longer term is looking bright for us. You know, we continue to export, to build on this, to trade globally. And yeah, let's hang on in there, keep going on doing what we do. And the likes of Carol and you know, the communities and support that's around, tap into it as much as you can. And I hope that, you know, this has been useful, at least some key takeaways or thoughts, even, you know, thoughts of consideration around how you're going to build your international business moving forward.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Victoria, and we'll speak again soon. Thanks everybody for joining in. I'm sorry it's a bit longer than normally, but you know, it's a big subject. I mean, we're going to put Brexit in room 101 for now, Victoria, till we get things ironed out, and then we'll take it back out again. Bye everybody, and thank you, Victoria.
Thanks, Carol. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye.